ABC News is getting a lot of backlash after it announced a settlement with President elect Donald Trump in the defamation lawsuit. Yes, the network has agreed to pay $15 million towards Trump's presidential library. Really? His presidential library? Okay. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know if they could figure out a way to just make an entire library out of tweets, because that's the only thing that Donald Trump has probably read outside of Mein Kampf. But anyway, and by the way, that's something that he himself, I believe, has admitted. But anyway, that money's going to a presidential library over statements made by anchor George Stephanopoulos during a broadcast earlier this year. So, as part of the settlement made public on Saturday, ABC News posted an editor's note to its website expressing regret over, Stephanopoulos' statements. What statements? Well, it was something that he talked about during a March 10th segment on This Week, where he was interviewing Nancy Mace. So he basically asked her how she could support a man that was found liable for rape. So now, officially, by the New York definition, he was found liable for sexual abuse, but there's not a lot of difference there. Okay, so Trump nonetheless saw that interview, got mad, and then sued. ABC News decided before depositions were to begin, with both Trump and Stephanopoulos sitting down for depositions. ABC News is like, we fold, we give, surrender, wait, here's our white flag, okay? We've given up. Oh, great. Now, in addition to the $15 million settlement, the network also agreed to pay $1 million in legal fees towards Trump's attorney. So, look, there's a lot of people that are pretty mad about this for good reason. In fact, Mark Elias wrote on X on Saturday, quote, "Knee bent, ring kissed." Another legacy news outlet chooses obedience. Yes, obedience to the incoming Trump regime. Another one. This is a former Washington Post media reporter, Paul Farhi, writes, "An awful precedent and a huge sellout." Oliver Willis, over on Threads, writes, "This is actually how democracy dies." Republicans against Trump also wrote, "People are not going to forget what ABC did." And then, of course, you have conservative political scientists. So this is not just online Twitter liberals, right? But you also have conservatives. As I just mentioned, it was the Republicans against Trump. But here is political scientist Norman J. Ornstein writing, "Add ABC to the basket of cowards in our media." Getting back to lefty criticism, human rights lawyer Kasim Rashid said this, quote, "This is the cowardice of legacy media out to make profit rather than uphold principle. The ongoing failure of legacy media is a stark reminder that independent and independently funded voices are now more critical than ever." Yeah, I mean, speaking as an independent media voice myself, yes, we're pretty much dying on the vine over here, on the left, while right-wing independent media, not so independent, as you could see from, like, Tim Pool getting funded by Russia. Lots and lots of rubles over there. Or at least there was, okay? But, okay, so, getting back to the important points, right? Based on the reaction here, you gotta ask the question, wait, is Trump actually liable for rape? Or is it not? Are they lying about it? Well, no, Mega's gonna say, they're lying, fake news. But no, in reality, the judge and the jury actually disagree. Turns out there's some nuance here in regards to New York Penal Code, which is a fun thing to say, but not so fun in this instance, okay? So back in 2023, Donald Trump was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation of E. Jean Carroll. He was ordered to pay $5 million. Trump did not stop defaming Carroll, and so in January, he was ordered to pay $83.3 million in additional defamation claims. So really kind of hammering that home, making a point, okay? So now, when upholding the judgment in the first trial, Louis A. Kaplan wrote that the jury found Carroll had failed to prove that Trump had raped her within the narrow technical meaning of a particular section of New York penal law. So, yeah, we're getting into the nitty-gritties here, okay? The definition of rape in the New York penal law is far narrower than the meaning of rape in common modern parlance. Its definition in some dictionaries and some federal and state criminal statutes and elsewhere. Kaplan emphasized that this did not mean that Carroll failed to prove that Mr. Trump had raped her, as many people commonly understand the word rape. So basically, to kind of break it down simply, the New York definition is so incredibly specific that even though Trump sexually assaulted Carroll, okay, but because he didn't do one very specific thing with a very specific body part, it is not considered in New York to be rape, but just abuse. So this whole thing, it's a technicality, but guess what? Trump is the king of technicalities, okay? Because he used this successfully to his advantage. He fought it, and then, well, ABC News was like, well, I guess we're going to stop fighting it. Now, why? Why? That's the question. Well, there's a lot of theories on this. So according to Ronnell Anderson-Jones, professor of law at the University of Utah, speaking to the New York Times, she said, what we might be seeing here is an attitudinal shift, really, compared to the mainstream American press of a decade ago. Today's press is far less financially robust. I mean, yeah, we can definitely see that with newsrooms all across the country, cutting staff, laying people off, laying off journalists. It's just been an absolute bloodbath. She also says that they are far more politically threatened, with Trump, of course, threatening to shut down the press. And of course, you have very, very low, approvals, very, very low trust in media outlets now. And then she says exponentially less confident that a given jury will value press freedom rather than embrace a vilification of it. All right, so there's some pretty good points in that. All right. I do think, though, the biggest part of that decision was the fact that, yes, Trump is coming back into power. And as our corporate media stands today, legacy media wants access to that Trump administration. They always want access to power. And that's what you've seen here. Access means profit. Fox News has all the access that they could ever want with Trump. Okay? That's why they're the top legacy media outlet. They're absolutely crushing CNN, MSNBC, and everyone else. Compared to, again, MSNBC, who lost 46% of their audience in the first, compared to the first 10 months of 2024. So just in these, just since the election, they've lost 46% of their audience. CNN is down 33% after the election. Fox News, however, booming. They've captured a 70% share of the cable news audience in the weeks since the president-elect won another term in the White House. That is the largest increase in its history. Absolutely crushing it. And that's a terrible thing for this country, by the way. Now, here's the thing, though. So a lot of people might look at that and be like, aha, they're coming over to the truth. They're watching Fox News because Fox News is real news. No, it's not. MSNBC viewers are not suddenly becoming Republicans. All right. And by the way, it's MSNBC hosts, funny enough, a lot of them are Republicans, like Morning Joe, or former Republicans at least. No, it turns out that a lot of the people tuning out right now, they're just tuning out of news altogether. Like they're like, that's it. I'm done. I'm gonna go. I'm depressed. I'm angry. I'm gonna go watch something else. According to Nielsen data, many of those MSNBC viewers and CNN viewers have headed for outlets that provide escapist entertainment. like the Hallmark Channel. Oh, great. So, like, you know what? I'm noping out of here. This sucks. I'm gone. I'm gonna go watch some Hallmark. Maybe get some of my sanity back. On the one hand, I don't really blame them, but at the same time, like, why were you watching MSNBC in the first place? Why were you watching people like Morning Joe in the first place? I think that's part of the problem. Again, because you have, these different worlds, and you have these different media ecosystems that are, echo chamber, especially over on the Fox News side, super echo chamber. But then on legacy media, you have basically the establishment, and there really is no left perspective here. So what you're getting is, super right wing versus kind of right wing. Not really a whole lot of choice there. But again, the result, legacy media, it's in the dumps. And now they're just giving in to Donald Trump in the hopes that they're going to get some access and win back some viewers, or maybe win some new viewers. I don't think that's going to work based on the reaction to people like Morning Joe, who lost a lot of their audience members as well, as a result of kowtowing to Donald Trump, going to Mar-a-Lago, etc. So, at the end of the day, I think what we're starting to see is, as a result of legacy media giving up on them, people are giving up on legacy media. Senator Ted Cruz has earned a rebuke from Texas's largest newspaper after he made some statements about the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. On Saturday, the Houston Chronicle wrote an editorial about these comments, calling them an attempt to, quote, vilify, inflame, and divide. Wow, those must have been some statements by Ted Cruz. Let me read them for you. He took to Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it, and said this: leftism is a mental disease. The suspected murderer, an Ivy League graduate, subscribed to an anti-capitalist and climate change causes, according to law enforcement, and the murder has been widely celebrated by leftists online. Tragic and sick. Okay, so this is LDS, right? It's leftist derangement syndrome. So kind of a new thing, but actually a pretty old phenomenon. It's been happening for quite some time, because Republicans see anything and they're like, radical leftists. It's the radical leftists. It's the radical leftists' fault. It's all the radical leftists. You even have some Democrats, that have been beating up on the radical far left leftists, and it's pretty funny because leftists have absolutely no institutional power or power whatsoever. And I guess it makes us the perfect whipping voice for, your own mistakes. I mean, Kamala Harris ran a very centrist conservative campaign, okay, traveling around with, Mark Cuban and Liz Cheney, and somehow some of these same dumbbells are saying like, see, she was too woke, she was too leftist, and therefore that's why she lost against Donald Trump. It's ridiculous. It would be funny if it wasn't so damaging to this country. Okay. But getting back to the whole point, right? Was it the left that's celebrating the murder of Brian Thompson? No doubt there were some people out there that did celebrate it, but it ain't just on the left. All right. Turns out this is one of the things that kind of unites the right and the left. Basically having no sympathy for Brian Thompson, not really celebrating murder. Again, some did, okay, but I think most people were like, I'm sorry, I don't really have a lot of sympathy for this. I mean, yeah, I don't condone murder and all that, but let's just say that my sympathy is currently out of network. Okay, it really, the reaction shows you this really was not a left or right issue. Everyone is impacted by health insurance. Turns out we as human beings by the virtue of just, being alive, fleshy blood bags with muscle and bone, we kind of need health care. It's kind of like a requirement. All right. So we're all affected by health insurance denials. All right. Uh, I guess unless you happen to be, taking insurance donor money and are very, very wealthy, then maybe you're not so affected. Okay, that you could just pay out of pocket or just pay to fly somewhere else and get healthcare, in one of those socialist countries that you always decry. But anyway, here's the thing, though. What's scaring the establishment, people like Ted Cruz and members of the media elite, is that you have some Republican voters that have started to figure out what something that leftists have already known all along. That, hey, wait a minute, there are people out there who want us to fight each other so they can pick our pockets while we're distracted. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how do they distract us? Through wedge issues, through identity politics. Now, in this case, I just mentioned Kamala Harris. She didn't run on any of that stuff. She ran on freedom, liberty, protecting democracy. All that stuff's very important, by the way. I like freedom. I like liberty. I like democracy. All are good things. But, she ran on those things. She did not, however, run on woke. Okay? She did not run on trans liberation or black liberation or land back or anything like that, right? Any of the stuff that some people would consider to be crazy, right? No, she didn't run on any of that. Okay. There were some, good policies, tax credits and things like that, that are generally, your democratic fare, which actually a lot of these policies pour pretty well. So it made a lot of sense for her to run on these things, but she didn't run on the woke. All right. Who ran on identity issues? Who ran on wedge issues? Republicans. Of course. Republicans ran on anti-trans hysteria. Yes. But that is not why Donald Trump had won. Oh, no. It turns out when you asked voters what their most important issues were, trans issues didn't really register. Not all that high. Turns out it was jobs in the economy, the cost of living. Oh. A lot of people really cared about that. Now, that said, healthcare, I think, is a part of that. Okay. But neither side really spoke much about healthcare during this campaign. So, getting back to Ted Cruz, right? He's out there doing I can't believe the left hates insurance CEOs. Bro, most people do not like CEOs, okay? I mean, as if, overpaid executives that are essentially middlemen who set policy that denies care at record levels in order to personally enrich themselves, as if those people deserve our love and undying respect. Oh, what? No, of course they don't. Now, it doesn't mean that they deserve to be murdered, right? But they certainly don't deserve our respect. And honestly, healthcare shouldn't be a for-profit model. Nobody should be profiting off of denials of care. Like, that's a really effed up position to have in any society. And yet we have normalized it. We've allowed it in our society for far too long. Now, that said, getting back to the details here, remember, United Health, speaking of claims, right, denied about a third of them, 32%. And when it came to elderly Medicare Advantage patients, okay, these are people who are 65 and older, all right, they were denied 90% of the time. 90% of all claims. They said it was by a faulty AI model put in by CEO Brian Thompson. Yeah. So if you've ever had an issue with your insurance company, I mean, it's, if you've had a problem, you would know what we're talking about. If you've never had this problem, either you've never had to use your insurance, so you've never been through this, costly denial process where you have to spend time on the phone arguing with the insurer, all that stuff, or you are paid off. You're a bitch like Ted Cruz, who takes money from the health insurance industry. I'm just saying. Now, regular people, again, when Thompson was shot, didn't react with outrage. Okay? Not excusing it, but they're also like, yeah, I kind of get it. Most people condemned it and then went on to share their horror stories of being denied necessary medical care while these executives get rich. Thompson made $10 million a year. So trying to paint this as a left versus right thing, it's pretty ridiculous when you look at the people who are actually doing it, though. Okay? Because the people who are doing it, it's almost always super wealthy people in media and politics. They've got great health care or they have great insurance. And so they don't have to worry about, losing their health care, losing their money. But here though was interesting because we actually have a media outlet that's bucking the trend. This was the newspaper's editorial board, okay, saying this. This week he leapt into the swirling headlines around the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson and suspect Luigi Mangione by doing what he does best, flattening complex issues and people into sound bites or social media posts that vilify, inflame, and divide. They added that Cruz's point about being tragic and sick has some merit, not just because celebrating murder can be tragic and sick, but because some of the people doing it apparently had their own experiences with tragedy and sickness that healthcare denials only exacerbated. Blaming the vengeful anger on leftism? Cruel health insurance practices in this country are their own kind of disease. Cruz could help heal it if he wanted, but that would require doing his job. And, well,
can't let that happen.
Healthcare lobbyists, specifically, would never allow that to happen. Remember, United Healthcare Health Group, alone donated over $100 million since 1998 to ensure that the United States does not join the rest of the modern world in guaranteeing healthcare to all of its citizens. So, Ted Cruz, you can only surmise that he does not see his job as bringing healthcare to everyone. He sees his job as defending the status quo that gets 68,000 people a year killed. That's it. His job is to distract us with a bogus left versus right narrative. Now, I'm not saying there isn't legit differences between the left and right. Oh, there are. Absolutely. Things like trans rights, for example. Oh, huge differences. Huge differences. And other things. But when it comes to basic things that we need to survive, like food, healthcare, yeah, we're actually a lot more alike than we are different. It's just the 1% and their lackeys like Cruz do everything in their power to make sure we never find that out. The health insurance industry, still shook after the murder of Brian Thompson, is vowing to take a look at making some changes. Oh, they're going to take a look. Right, they're going to get right on that. Speaking at the Reuters Next conference in New York, Amazon pharmacy chief medical officer Vin Gupta, which I don't know why Amazon has a pharmacy chief medical officer. That doesn't seem right. But he acknowledged some systemic issues that were fueling public anger. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Here's what he said. Our health system needs to be better. There's a lot of things that should cause a lot of outrage. Oh, okay. All right. I think maybe he's getting it. Maybe he's getting it. There's an admission there. Now, some of the things that, of course, should cause outrage is the fact that 60% of all bankruptcies are a result of medical bills. And then in other countries, by the way, medical bankruptcy does not exist. Yes, that's correct. We're the only country that has medical bankruptcies. And by the way, there's a big link between medical bankruptcy and homelessness. A big issue too. In fact, a 2007 study found that 25% of respondents said their medical debt led to housing problems. 9% of homeowners facing foreclosure in Philadelphia had cited illness or medical costs as their primary reason for them being behind on their mortgage payments. That's right. Some people have had to, decide whether or not to do life-saving healthcare treatments, right? Like maybe cancer treatments, chemo, whatever. I have to decide between doing that or paying your bills. Again, only country in the world where people have to be, get forced to make that decision. So that's what we're doing, right? Another study found that if a homeless person had had trouble paying their medical bills, that the length of their current episode of homelessness gets extended by usually more than 2 years. So yeah, that medical issues cause homelessness, can cause homelessness, and exacerbate it. Yeah. So medical debt and bankruptcy not only destroy lives, but the denial of care from some of these companies also can lead to permanent disability or even death. I mean, think about it this way, right? So there are certain conditions that perhaps could be solved with preventative care, okay, or solved before it gets to be that bad. I mean, diabetes, for example, right? It's a very, very common, right? You can go blind from diabetes. You can lose limbs from diabetes. So that is like from, untreated diabetes. So, I mean, with those things, those are very major disabilities that could be prevented if people had access to be able to go in to, get assessed and to have their medication, their insulin. But again, in this country, we put profit over people's lives and would rather disable or kill people, preferably in their eyes, because dead people, don't cost anything to them. They would rather have that than pay out claims, than lose profits. But quarterly profits. So that's what's going on. These are, again, serious issues caused by the greed of the health insurance industry. Now back to Gupta. He then cautioned, of course, against normalizing violence, adding, it's also true that the killing should not have happened. There cannot be this false moral equivalence in our discourse. Okay, but hold on. I don't really think that there's a false moral equivalence here. 68,000 people die every year from lack of health care. Okay? I mean, that's the reality. When you deny somebody's care, that could be effectively killing them. I mean, it's not as dramatic as shooting someone, obviously, but it has the same effect. You are killing them. So, and by the way, there are people that die that have insurance, right? But they cannot afford to use the insurance because of the super high deductibles or the copays that they can't meet. Or again, the denials, okay? The denials of care. And so there are people out there that do not get care until it is too late. Understand that this is why there is so much anger, okay? People are paying out the nose for something that, they're told, oh, don't worry, you pay this premium so that if you get hurt or you get sick, then we're going to cover you. No problem, right? That's the whole point of insurance. But then when they go to use it, they either get denied or because of how expensive it is, they end up getting bankrupted. So even if they survive, they're still in dire straits. Look, I do agree, though, he's right that this shouldn't have happened. But I will also say that had we had universal health care, guaranteed health care, then nothing like this would have happened. And the people who are responsible for us not having universal health care, a lot of that is on the health insurance industry. I'll get into those numbers. But first, before that, Pfizer's chief sustainability officer, Carolyn Roan, echoed Gupta's sentiments, describing Thompson's death as a, quote, tragedy of epic proportions, and said, clearly there's a larger dialogue that needs to happen. And we're going to be taking our time to try to understand exactly what happened and understand that feedback and see where we can play a positive role. Well, you could start by having your respective companies not buy our politicians and tell them to block universal health care. Look, a majority of Americans want Medicare for all, 62%. Okay. Or 62% say they would want the government to guarantee health care for all people. Okay. Even more Americans want a public option, which is to allow Americans, if they want to buy into Medicare instead of having to wait till they're 65. Okay. Uh, and yet, thanks to massive donations from health insurance lobbyists and for-profit groups, well, for-profit hospital groups specifically, okay, because there's a lot of for-profit groups, but that are involved in healthcare, like a pharmaceutical industry, for example. But thanks to all of those groups and all that money, we do not have it. We do not have a public option. We have a patchwork mishmash of for-profit private insurance. That's it. Propped up by government subsidies and tax credits. It's a disastrous system. Okay. So now to really like conceptualize how much spending here, I'm just going to tell you the numbers. From 2000 to 2020, so it's a 20-year period, healthcare lobbying grew by 70%, reaching over $713 million. Yeah. So this is from health insurance companies, device and drug makers, as well as hospitals and healthcare consultants and other groups. So you have pharmaceutical industry, they're probably, I believe they are the biggest lobbyist when it comes to Congress. So they spend astronomical sums of money in order to block, for example, Medicare and Medicaid from being able to negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. Okay. And so, they just have a massive outsized influence in Congress. And this is why we pay more than any other country on earth for prescription drugs. That's it. Now, the thing is, the health industry gives money not just to Republicans, but actually to both parties. In fact, since 2016, the health services / HMO industry, which traditionally gives more to Republicans, decided to shift to distribute more campaign funds to Democrats. And during the 2021-2022 election cycle, around 60% of funds were donated to the Democrats. Among the major health plans, United Health Group, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Humana, and Molina Healthcare donated nearly evenly to the two parties, whereas Centene Corp and Kaiser Permanente gave the majority of their contributions to the Democrats. And so, yes, Republicans, they get a lot of health industry money, but Democrats actually get more, which is why we not only do not have a public option, because remember, Joe Lieberman killed the public option when it came to the ACA, okay? And then why Democrats have just defended the ACA and have said no to Medicare for all. And even though Joe Biden talked about, yeah, sure, public option sounds be great. Hasn't talked about it since the election, since 2020, basically. Immediately dropped it. So yeah, no, we're Obamacare, fine, we're going to defend that. But a lot of people are very unhappy with the ACA. Even though, yes, it does poll well, and it's a lot better than what we had before, still, the ACA is a failure when you still have a lot of the old problems that still exist. And so we should have a public option or should be moving towards Medicare for all. But we won't because of this money. And by the way, remember, in 2020, Democrats rallied to destroy Bernie Sanders before Super Tuesday because Bernie Sanders wanted to do what? Medicare for all. One of the reasons that they tried to destroy Bernie Sanders. That said, this is why these health insurance CEOs why their words are, or these executives, I should say, because the CEOs are currently hiding, but it's why their words are empty. Okay, there's more. United Health Group CEO Andrew Whitty did write an op-ed for the New York Times, where he admitted that the health system does not work as well as it should. And we understand the people's frustrations with it. Oh, do you? Oh, do you now? No one would design a system like the one we have, he said, and no one did. It's a patchwork built over decades. No, no, no. No one would design a system like this. You mean that's massively for profit? That profits health insurance companies and executive? Yeah, he's right that it's a patchwork, right? But that's by design, because you and your lobbyists have outsized influence in shaping healthcare policy. And so, yeah, you guys, you own this healthcare system because you've spent millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbying to keep it this way. Look, United Health Group, for example, since 1998, they gave them $100 million to politicians with the promise of, hey, we're going to keep giving you more money, but you got to stop universal health care because the money must flow. You can't get in the middle of our profit margins. And those politicians have delivered stupendously for them. He then, getting back to Whitty, claimed Thompson's work was actually had aimed to make healthcare more affordable and more compassionate. You see, Mangione, he shot the wrong guy. It was, he was trying to help. He was trying to help. How dare he take on this wonderful humanitarian? In fact, he said the ideas he advocated were aimed at making healthcare more affordable, more transparent, more intuitive, more compassionate, and more human. That's Brian's legacy, one that we will carry forward by continuing our work to make the health system work better for everyone. Now, Brian's legacy was bringing United Health Group $23 billion in profit. Yeah. By denying people healthcare. Remember, they were sued for using a supposedly faulty AI model that ended up denying care to 90% of all Medicare Advantage claims. These are elderly folks, okay? 90%, and they say faulty because, well, I mean, a lot of these, obviously 90% of these claims were denied. No, the vast majority of those claims were actually legitimate claims for legitimate healthcare needs. And so they say, well, it must have been faulty. No, it was working as intended because they save so much money. And then there's also upcharging and things like that, or, upcoding, where they basically make these people on Medicare Advantage plans seem sicker than they are so they could charge them more, charge Medicare more. So, yeah, there's that. And not only that, but the company itself had an overall 32% claim denial rate. Highest of all companies. So that's Brian Thompson's legacy as CEO of United Health Group. Okay, that's it. And overall, in the system here, we pay more for healthcare than any other country in the world, and yet have worse outcomes. There's something wrong with the system. And the very people who are now claiming that, oh yeah, no, we're gonna take a look, we see where the problem is. Well, for that, I would recommend that they get a mirror. The Walt Disney Company has agreed to settle the largest wage theft lawsuit in California history. According to the Los Angeles Times, Disneyland workers sued the company for basically ignoring the city of Anaheim's minimum wage law for a period of several years. So what happened? City raises its wage, and the company's like, no, we're not going to pay that because we're not gonna we didn't get any tax incentives, and so yeah, we're just not gonna do it. Now they would have gotten away with it if it weren't for unions. So unions basically, and I'll go through the details here, but union said, actually no, you're getting underpaid. They're stealing your wages, and the workers are like, they are? Well, oh, okay. Well, we're going to sue them then. And guess what? They won $233 million. Disney has agreed to provide back pay to all of the workers at the Anaheim theme park with interest dating back to 2019. The agreement will be reviewed by an Orange County Superior Court judge on January 17th, before workers will then be notified how much money they can expect to receive. More than 50,000 current and former Disney employees are covered in the settlement, and the back paid owed to those workers from January 1st, 2019 to when Disney adjusted wages last year amounts to around $105 million. Wow. Peter Dreyer, professor of public policy at Occidental College, told the LA Times, quote, company has been stiffing workers for several years. They denied them back pay that they're owed while paying CEO Bob Iger over $31 million a year. That's a travesty. It's only fair that workers get what's coming to them, and if the world were fair, Iger would take some of it out of his paycheck. Now, he won't, unfortunately. But, hey, you know what? A win is still a win, and it's a win for the workers, who, according to a 2018 survey by the Coalition of Resort Labor Unions, revealed that almost 3/4 of them said that they didn't earn enough money to cover their basic expenses. That's right. So they work, they can't afford to live. Now, I keep getting told that no, all you got to do is just get a job. That's it. That's all you need to do. Just get a job and quit complaining, and you'll be able to survive. These people have a job, and they work all the time, and yet they don't have enough to live on. In the richest country in the world. That should not happen. Should not happen. And now the reports that released coincided with a wage initiative known as Measure L, which ordered these companies in the Anaheim Resort that receive a city tax rebate to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. As Walt Disney Company negotiated pay with theme park unions and union councils, it did not adjust its employees' wages in line with the new initiative, prompting Disney workers to file the lawsuit in December of 2019. That lawsuit originally represented about 25,000 employees and alleged that Walt Disney Company had illegally avoided implementing the wage adjustments. At the time, the attorneys for Walt Disney argued that, we didn't have a tax rebate agreement with Anaheim, so, obviously we don't have to pay them a higher wage. A judge initially agreed with the company. Per the outlet, though, the ruling was later reversed by a district court of appeal on the basis that a tax rebate back in 1996 for an expansion was passed by the Anaheim City Council. So they did get tax rebates from the city. Therefore, hey, if you ever got a tax rebate, then you should raise these wages so that your workers don't live in poverty. Seems fair to me. Now, Disney appealed that decision, but the California Supreme Court refused to hear the case, which concluded the company's legal fight. So, of course, they fought it because, at the end of the day, companies don't want to pay. Labor is one of the biggest expenses for a company. But, that's because labor is also the thing that helps your companies survive and actually make products or do services. So yeah, you kind of need labor. You're not seeing the executives and the shareholders, unless you're in a worker co-op or something, that are actually doing the labor. Okay? You're not seeing that. It's the workers that do the labor, and it's the workers that deserve a wage that they can live on. Because otherwise, what's the point of working if you're not going to be able to survive? Okay? Doesn't make any sense. But now, here's the thing. These companies, as I mentioned, didn't want to pay. But there is this oldest talk about crime, right? Specifically theft, retail theft. I mean, I remember especially in California, you're seeing all these local news reports. Oh, flash mobs showing up. They're robbing the Walmarts and they're robbing these stores, electronics stores at Best Buys. They're coming in. They're stealing millions of dollars worth of goods. Oh my God. I mean, it's all over the news all the time. You hear about that, but when your boss steals your money from your paycheck, nobody talks about it. That's interesting, especially because wage theft is actually the largest kind of theft in the country. How bad is it? Each year, employers steal an estimated $15 billion from workers every year. It's all across the country. Now, when you compare that to property crimes, the very, very well publicized property crimes, flash mobs and things like that, that actually totals around $500 million yearly. So it's a drop in the bucket compared to wage theft. And by the way, the victims of this kind of theft, they're not exactly who you would think, okay? Now, turns out the majority of workers with wages that are reported below the minimum wage are actually over 25, okay? Are native-born U.S. citizens. Nearly half of them are white, and more than a quarter have children, and just over half of them work full-time. Not exactly who you would think, right? That said, young workers, women, people of color, immigrant workers, they're much more likely than other workers to report being paid less than the minimum wage. But this is primarily because they're also more likely than other workers to be in those low-wage jobs. Okay, so this is a minimum wage. This is a low-wage service industry, mainly, phenomenon that happens. Okay, low-wage workers also experiencing minimum wage violations at high rates across all demographic categories. So basically, it's not just a working class issue. It is the worker issue. We're all working class here. If you work for a living, you are by definition working class. That's it. And so this is a major issue that is underreported, and it should be talked about a lot more. And there should be more that is done about it. Okay. And again, it was notice how labor unions were instrumental in bringing this case to light. And so, yeah, that's why the right wing, by the way, who generally, defends corporations, that's why they hate labor unions. Because these unions actually fight for the workers against corporate theft. This is a big win. All right. But understand more needs to get done. We need more worker protections. All right. Especially when it comes to retaliation against, the workers from these very companies that are stealing from them. Okay. Because right now you've got people living paycheck to paycheck. You got people that can't afford a $400 emergency. And so they're not really armed and equipped to be able to fight back. And so that's one of the big problems here. Now, that said, another problem is the incoming administration. I don't really expect a whole lot of headway to be made on this front from Trump. I mean, nobody really seems to be more anti-worker in practice than Donald Trump, despite his, pro-worker rhetoric. His actions, when you look at the last administration, when it comes to labor rights, when it comes to wage theft, by the way, because he actually signed, a piece of legislation that made it easier for your employer to steal your tips. Okay, so that's Trump's record on this. Trump's NLRB is not going to be all that great. It's going to be very anti-worker and pro-corporation. So that's not going to be good for workers. That said, forging ahead. That's what we have to do. We got to keep fighting, no matter who's in office, whether it be Democrat or Republican, okay, to ensure that every worker gets what they're owed. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon in order to get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support independent, progressive media through this difficult time where it seems like everybody is shutting down, you can become a member on our YouTube page, you can become a subscriber on Facebook, or you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Thank you.